Welcome to True Wellness with Dr. D, the podcast where we explore what it takes to live with vitality, balance, and purpose. I am Dr. D, and each week I'll bring you powerful tools, inspiring stories, and expert insights to help you thrive in every area of your life. From health and wellness to mindset and navigating life's challenges, this podcast is your guide to creating a life of true well-being. Be sure to check the show notes and grab your free copy of the True Wellness Checklist so you can get started on your journey to true wellness right away. Now, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. So, most people think that grief is something you eventually get over, right? But the truth is, you don't actually get over it. You either get stuck in it or you grow through it. And today's guest knows the truth better than most. Lisa Archer, she is an international certified and accredited life coach, a grief coach, a certified grief educator, an international speaker, an international best-selling author. She knows what she's speaking about, right? She's also the host of Because We Love, Finding Meaning After Loss podcast, where she shares her message about, that you can fully grieve and still fully live as well. So after facing profound loss herself, Lisa, she refused to let grief actually define the end of her story. And instead, she transformed her pain into purpose. And now she helps men and women do exactly that. In today's conversation, we're diving into what grief really looks like, why it's not just about death, but actually there are many different kinds of loss, and how you can begin creating a life of authenticity, passion, and hope, even when it feels like your heart's been shattered. So grief may be a lonely road, but Lisa Archer says you don't have to walk it alone, right, Lisa?
Correct.
Well, thank you for being here with us today. I know we've got so much to talk about, and I know a lot of our listeners, I think all of us as human beings have experienced grief, but a lot of our listeners sort of in the midlife phase are in the space where, we're losing people, we're losing parents, we're losing family members. And, maybe we're not having loss in terms of life and death, but maybe we're going through life transformations like divorce or our children moving out or all of these different things. So I'm really excited for us to dive into this topic because it's an important one.
So, it is. Yes. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You have a remarkable story, one that certainly pulls at my heartstrings. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about your story and how you came to this place where it's almost, I don't know, you might need to correct my language here. So feel free if it doesn't feel like the right words, but where you've made peace with grief.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I mean, I think I come from a place of, what do they say? Come from a place of a scar and not the open gaping wound. And so, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know most people think of grief, like I said before, as something you get over, but you say that that's a myth. So why is that so damaging? And what is the truth about grief?
Yes, the thing is that we have these words that we say, right? And we have these sayings like, "Will time heals all wounds?" And it is not true. So when we're talking about the loss of a loved one who has passed away, to say that we would get over that is like saying they didn't exist, that we won't then, that they didn't exist. The love is gone. Like they're gone. And that is really damaging, because what that does is individuals will then go, something's wrong with me because I haven't gotten over it. Like, what is wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
And what I really want to stress is that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You're grieving. That is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's really powerful. I think it's powerful for a couple different reasons, right? One is that I do think it sets us up for this, like there's something wrong with us. But the other thing I think that happens is we come to learn to sort of stuff the emotions versus actually move through those emotions. You know, we had one of our podcast guests was Dr. Joan Rosenberg, and she has a book called 90 Seconds to a Life You Love. And the book is all about actually our in our practice, we have a book club going on with the book right now, but the premise is that when we bury those feelings versus riding the wave, it starts to show up other ways, have negative impacts in our life. So how do we dive into it even though it's really uncomfortable?
Yes, it is very important because it sits there. It's the body knows the score. And body
That's
keeps the score.
another
Yes,
good book.
yes, and that yes, very heady, but very good.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, that's exactly why I threw everything at it when I was faced with so much loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your journey, because I mean, you've lived through loss in a way that most people can't imagine.
It's interesting because growing up, I'd lost like a grandma, a grandpa died before I was born. I lost an aunt. I was young. I didn't experience loss or grief. And it wasn't something that I had experienced until I was older.
Mm,
So I am from Seattle, but I moved to the UK in 2005. So I'm 5,000 miles away from my family. And, my parents aren't getting any younger. And it's always kind of in the back of your mind as you start getting older, they start getting older, and you're dreading this phone call.
yep.
And this all happened in 2018.
Mm,
So in January of 2018, we received a call that my niece from my ex-husband's side of the family had passed away from a long hereditary illness. She was in her 30s.
oh,
And a week later, I get the message from my mom, "Can you talk?" And I was like, "Oh, this is her middle of the night, my morning." So she then explains to me that my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer
mm,
and that he would have to have surgery. And of course, at that time, it's as if the earth opened up and swallowed me. I was I'm very close to my parents. So that was kind of the first real, oh my God, like reality facing what this might actually be,
yes.
um, not knowing anything about brain cancer.
Yes.
So my dad had surgery and they couldn't remove any of the tumor. It was too advanced. So I quit my job here in the UK and I went and lived with my parents because, I'm helping my dad, but I'm helping my mom, right? Like I'm helping my mother. They've been married forever.
Yes.
Um, and it was important for me to be there. And so I stayed there for 7 months until my dad passed away. And when you are grieving your own loss, you're also carrying the grief of others. So I'm carrying the grief of my daughters, carrying the grief of my mom. I'm carrying the grief of my brother, his family. Like you're carrying everybody's grief along with your own.
Hmm.
And I then came back to the UK, and my mom came to visit several months later, which was very strange to have my mom get off the plane and not have my dad there.
Yeah.
But we traveled and we went and did some of the things that my mom wanted to do. And I hugged my mom. She stayed for a couple months, and I hugged my mom. And 2 months later, Um, I didn't realize that that would be the last time that I would hug my mom. She wasn't answering her phone. She didn't call. She didn't do any of that. And so I knew something was wrong. So I said to my brother, "Everybody get over there. Something's not right." And she had passed away peacefully, but in her sleep.
Hmm.
Back to the States I go to do another eulogy, and in between this time I'd lost friends, I'd lost friends' children. And then 2 months after my mom passed away, obviously I came back to the States. And 2 months after that, I got a call in the middle of the night that my 24-year-old son-in-law had passed away from a fall in front of my daughter. Uh,
Hmm.
we lived 2 hours away. Get in the car in the middle of the night and go. And, by far, that was literally the most devastating.
Hmm.
Jack had been a part of our home since they were 16 years old and was my daughter's love of her life. And in a split second, her whole world shattered along with his family, us, all of us. And so in between 2018 and 2019, I lost 12 loved ones through,
Gosh.
which is a lot.
Mhm.
So, for me, it was about now, how do I support my daughter? What you're saying, how do I not let this sit in here to where then I have some form of autoimmune disease or something so I threw everything I could at this grief. I hired a bereavement counselor. I hired a coach. I went to Reiki. I did all the energy work. I saw a medium.
Yes.
I tarot cards, like you name it. I was like on Zumba. I went hiking. I was just like everything, everything I could do, everything I could think of. And people would say, well, what worked? And I was like all of it helped, all of it. Nothing was, I did everything that I could. And that's what compound grief. It's just one loss after another, after another, after another, after another.
Yes. 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 What do you feel really moved the dial for you?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey, this is Dr. D. I just wanted to remind you that you can get started on your true wellness journey. Go ahead and check the show notes and grab a link to the True Wellness Checklist. Now, let's get back to the episode.
I think time does not heal all wounds, but time allowed me this space. What happens is when you have such significant loss, it can put like a shining light on areas of your life that you're unhappy.
Mm,
And that was my marriage. We had been married for many years, but you start going, wow, life is fragile, life is short.
yeah.
I'm unhappy, you're unhappy. So a year after we lost Jack is when I separated from my husband. But it really was a turning point because I went into my apartment where I'd lived on my own now. I'd never lived on my own.
Yeah.
And I breathed in and I breathed out and I created this sanctuary for myself.
Mm,
And that could look like sitting in front of the fireplace, crying my eyes out. It could be eating chocolate and watching Netflix or taking a nap or going out and doing stuff. So for me, it was just this healing space.
yeah.
And that was a real turning point, but I did not do it alone. I had a lot of support.
Mm. What What do you think the difference is between trying to do it alone and trying and having the support? Because I think a lot of people feel like they have to go through this grieving process by themselves, right? Maybe they feel shameful, maybe they feel embarrassed, maybe they feel uncomfortable about burdening, and I'm giving quote fingers here, right? Like burdening other people with their grief. What's really the truth behind having that support system?
Yes, it is. Again, it's so complex and everybody grieves differently. And so how one person responds to loss isn't how somebody else is. So we don't understand why that person's not feeling this way or why are they not responding this way. And so it is very complex. One of the key things for me that was really, really important was would shelf, I would put on the shelf the toxic or energy draining vampires in my life. I would just set them aside. Now, some might have gotten kicked off, bye, you're gone. And others may have just been on the shelf for a while and then, okay, I'll bring you back in when I've got some energy because I had to protect what little energy I had.
Mm,
And so my tribe, my people were those people that I could just be me and I could say
right.
the things I needed to say. But it
Yeah.
was also really, really important for me to have my bereavement counselor, a third party person who wasn't emotionally attached to what I was going through. That
Mhm.
was also really, really helpful. So one of the things that I was really is really, really an important piece for me was to create anything of training, a form, a document, a handout of the do's and don'ts when supporting a griever, some just practical steps. This to me is really important. So, as the person who's the friend, I want to be able to say, here's some do's and don'ts. And that just empowers them to go, do you know what? It's okay. It's okay. I have some tools and I can support them in a healthy way. And that to me is so, so important. So I learned a lot during this process.
Yeah, I love that. You know, I I think about so you and I we don't have a history, so you don't know this. So I'll share this story with you. But several years ago, we had one of our staff members in our practice. So, I have a functional medicine practice. As we have health coaches that work with me to serve our clients. And at this point in my life, I was between two different offices, traveling back and forth between New York and Texas, completely exhausted. And I remember I had the night before my travels, I had stepped on a fire ant mound, went into anaphylactic shock, literally almost died. Right, we had to like stop on the way to the hospital. I wouldn't have made it to the hospital. Um, and the next morning I had my flight to JFK, and off I was on that 11 o'clock flight to JFK, because I just kind of was pushing through just to take care of everybody else. And when I landed on the tarmac and I turned my phone off airplane mode, I got a call from one of our coaches who informed me that one of our other coaches on our staff had passed away in a terrible accident. Mom of three, 49 years old, just the most loving, caring soul. And I know for me in that moment, I went into caregiver mode, because now I was also not just responsible for my own grief, but felt like I needed to be responsible for the entire community of our clients. I mean, that coaching relationship is sacred. And I know at some point I had to take a step back and I had to say, all right, Danielle, you actually have to walk through this for yourself. You can't just be the beacon for everybody else. Right. So what advice do you give to your clients or to the people in your life when they're in that space where they're holding the energy for other people? Like you said, you were doing the same for your family, and still managing and caring for themselves in their grieving process as well.
Yes, yes. I mean, you've lived it, you understand it. And And when you're in it, there are people who just go, I just have to do, like, I'm the doer. So what do I need to do? Action, action, action. Exactly. So there's those of us who are like, oh, we got to just action. We are action oriented. And then we're going 100 miles an hour at that wall. And what we need to do is make sure we put the brakes on before we hit that wall, because that is when we can really just go into that space that is, we don't want to get out of bed, right? Like, it's really a lot of depression and anxiety. And one of the biggest things is we do what we have to do in that moment. Like, we do, I wouldn't say to somebody, oh, well, don't, bother going over to your mom's house to care for, because of course you're going to do that.
Right.
But I always say to individuals, and I just had this conversation with a client today, what are you going to do after you are in that space? Like, so you're going to visit this person, then what are you going to do for you? And
Right.
that is really an important question. Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, let's talk about what you now can do to get rid of, or at least release some of that pressure and tension and stress and guilt, grief and pain. And she was like, oh, I do have a CrossFit class I can go to tonight. Great. Go do that.
Yeah.
It was just to release some of that energy. For me, the car was like a big thing. I would get in my car and I might go to work. Don't cry on the way to work because you don't want to mess up my makeup.
Yes.
But on the way home, it's fair game. And so I would or after I left my daughter, and I would just drive home, just hysterically crying. It was just it was a place for me to do that, and I used to think when I'd see someone crying in the car, I thought, oh, what boy problems or girl problems do they have? Like, what relationship problem? Now I'm like, oh my God, who died, when I see somebody crying, because I think that was me. And so it is really important to have something or someone. So a therapist, a coach, a best friend, someone who is your safe haven, and or go to kickboxing like I did sometimes. It's one of those that you should be thinking, what do I now need? That
Yeah.
is one of the most important questions. I used to say it to myself all the time, and I still do. What is it that I need right now? And
Yeah.
then sit with that and figure out what that is, and then go do it.
I love that. That is one question that I always tell people. So the True Wellness Framework, right? The T stands for tune in, to your body and your mind, like pay attention, come back to yourself. And one of the practical things that I always tell people is start your morning that way, right? Like, put your hand over your heart and ask that question, like, what do I need? Because we don't do that enough, especially as women. Like, we're asking, what does everyone else need? And then we're kind of like low man on the totem pole, so to speak, or
Yes.
the last one on the list. And if we don't stop to take care of ourselves, then we do end up at some point, we get stopped in our own tracks. So I love what you're saying. One of the things that I find a lot of our, unfortunately, a lot of our listeners also go through is, I'm going to call it a process of grief before, someone actually passes. So for example, like you said, with the diagnosis of brain cancer, there was this period of time. And I know that grieving doesn't just begin at the time of passing. Sometimes it begins at that time of diagnosis, or, we have clients who are watching family members struggle through what they know is their, their final months or their final days. And how would you suggest approaching those moments in time? I mean, you've even gone through it yourself.
Yes, yes. So I have definitely lived this sudden loss and we would call it anticipatory grief.
Mhm.
We know that this person is going to pass. And that I always say it isn't even just the loss of the loved one, it's hundreds of losses leading up to it.
Yeah.
The loss of it could be financial loss, it could be loss of homes, it's loss of health, loss of their mental health, it could be loss of relationships. I mean, there's hundreds of losses. Or they aren't who they used to be. That's a loss. Or
Yeah.
they used to be this strong. My dad was like a strong teamster, and then he ended up not being able to get out of a chair or a bed, or he
Mhm.
was confused as to why he was going to the toilet in the living room because we had a toilet for him in there.
Right.
It's like, and so you're watching this loss, and that is hundreds of losses.
Mhm.
And that is why those signpostings, that question, what do I need right now? One of the things living in Seattle, I used to grow up and I'd go to the water. So when my brother or somebody would come, I would then go, okay, I would go to the marina and I would just sit and I would breathe and I would practice my breath. And we hold our breath, don't we? And so I would practice these things. And that was really important because as soon as you think, okay, I kind of got this, boom, something else happens. And then, oh, I don't have this. I don't have it. Oh, he's now acting this way. It's the disease. But it is a very difficult thing for anticipatory grief because we know what the end result is.
Yes. Hmm.
We're waiting. We're waiting. It's this waiting game. And when they do pass, you're right. We've already been grieving for quite a while.
Hmm. Yeah. So just coming back to that, tuning into yourself and finding what you need and taking care of yourself as one of those key and pivotal things.
Yes, because you can't do anything about the reality of what is actually happening, right?
Yeah.
But you've got all the emotions that are there. The anger, this isn't fair. It's not fair. Like he's a great man, he's not old enough. Like you can rationalize all of those things and go, well, like this doesn't make sense, and I need this to make sense to
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
Um, so you're watching your loved one who is sliding and slipping away. That is the reality. You can't change it. So I would say, like, well, what can I do then to change how I'm like sitting here or how I'm feeling, or like even just changing my state when my dad was feeling like he was okay to travel around. So I'd like get in the car, let's go to Starbucks, or like we even we drove around the neighborhood to see some of the old places we used to live just to bring back some like memories for him. And so while we were in this anticipatory grief, we were pulling out the photo albums and talking about memories. And it was, and I remember that
Yes.
now. So it's like I'm still creating memories. So your listeners, we can create memories even in the anticipatory grief.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing to be able to hold on to. Because yeah, some of us who are people who need to be in control, I wrap myself out on that one for sure. When we face these circumstances in our lives that we have no control over, literally, right? It does give us an opportunity to say, okay, well, this is the circumstances that I've been given. Now, what can I do to actually transform the way this is going to go, right? Rather than be in that constant resistance to it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a process. This isn't something where we just go, oh well, I'll just do this. I'll
Yeah.
just accept I mean, that is not at all as simple as that. So as long as we have the support system, I think too, and I think there's just no rules. There's literally no rules. So throw that rule book out the window. There isn't any. And so therefore, how you feel and how you process is literally how you feel and how you process. And someone who has a relationship, I was really fortunate. My brother and I say we won the parent lottery. We were very fortunate. My parents were wonderful people. And not everybody has that. So
Right.
there is a complexity as well to those who have a difficult relationship with their siblings or their parents or whoever that person, their partner, whoever that person may be. So if you didn't have a healthy relationship with your mom or dad, then that is, produces a very different complex grief.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Thinking about, you know, after someone passes, so many people I find almost carry a sense of guilt maybe when they start to smile again or they start to enjoy life after loss. How do you help them reconcile actually grieving with living?
Yes, it's a really good question. I say that guilt and grief are like a married couple, they go hand in hand. I mean, so many times, even if you're doing everything right, even while they're, sick, we can still carry this level of grief. After they pass and we start to kind of lift our head up and see that, oh, wait a minute, I need to brush my teeth and take a shower and go to work. Like I need to live my life. Um, that can be a real difficulty with people. And so they can then feel very guilty for smiling again, for feeling happy. And what I tend to say is this is David Kessler, who is like my mentor, says you can fully live and fully grieve at the same time. Those two things actually can coexist. It's not like if you're happy or laughing and you're truly belly laughing, that somehow you're not grieving or you don't love your family member who died, it just isn't work that way. So those two things can coexist. And it's about then reminding them that, listen, this is the reality. Let's work through, not around and not get over. Let's work through the pain and process the loss. And then what ends up happening organically in the sessions is there's this, okay, now what? And there's a wave that happens where now we're in life coaching. So those grief coaching and life coaching go really well together because they start going, okay, they can breathe a little bit. Okay, wait a minute. And the way I personally have looked at it, not everybody has, but because my parents are who they are, it's a way for me to honor my parents is to make sure I'm happy. So
Yeah.
what do I need to do? Because my parents would want that for me, right? And so I didn't do that right away, but I started to think out after a while, I started to think, oh my God, they would be really not thrilled with me if I just am not getting out of bed or I'm just, in a slump. So there is an honor element that for me was really helpful.
Yes. Yes. I love that. And I think that is part of the healing journey of grief itself is finding that way to, I'm going to say transmute that emotion into something that, can grow and be the foundation of something really positive for our lives. I always say everything is always working out for our highest and best interest, and we have to respect our soul's journey. Unfortunately, this is a part of it is a part of life that we can't control. We can't we can resist, but it's going to happen anyway, and that we have to come to terms with. But like you said, it's also this opportunity for us to learn and grow as human beings as well.
Yes, and I always say to people, what we don't get over the loss, but what we can learn to do is create a life of passion and purpose around our pain. We can take that with us. It's like a berry. We can go, I'm going, this is where I'm going. And if I lean into my pain, if I lean into that experience, that is where I find my purpose. That's where I found my purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's kind of like life overall, right? We've all found our purpose through pain. As a healthcare practitioner, I know lots of healthcare practitioners, and most of us have come from that place of illness at some point ourselves, right? Or watching somebody else go through illness, that it's brought us into this space of purpose as a healthcare practitioner.
100%, 100%. And like you said, I mean, really, what is it? Death and taxes are the only two real things that everything else that, those are there for certain. So therefore, it isn't about figuring out how you're going to deal with it before it happens, because sometimes it just happens
Right.
immediately.
Yep.
But if we then have some resources, our support system, hugely important. So if you are surrounding yourself with people who are not, they're draining your energy, or they are completely toxic, or they're just not your people anymore, those are the people that need to go. And then you create that healthy tribe. Then when something happens, you've got your team of people.
Yeah, I love that. Human beings are not meant to do it on our own. We are social creatures. And I think we forget that, especially in this day and age of uh, just kind of text messages and social media. Like, it's so easy to zone out and pretend that we're not feeling an emotion, or pretend that we're connected in some way when we're not actually truly connecting with other human beings. But I personally think it makes such a world of difference, that there's nothing that compares to being heard or seen by another human being.
Absolutely. And we are meant for connection, aren't we? And we all want to be seen. We all want to be heard. We all want to be valued. And
Yeah.
when we're talking about grief, and everybody's doing it differently, and people say things because they don't know what to say, so they say the thing that actually is more harmful than helpful,
Yes.
then that just then you're shutting your curtains and you're like, oh, I just can't even listen to this anymore.
Right.
And so that, again, is one of the main reasons why I like to share why it's important what to say or not say, what to do or not do,
Mm,
because we want people to be feeling that they're in a safe community, or
yes.
at least a safe relationship, and they feel supported, seen, loved, heard, all of those things.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. What would you say is the biggest misconception about grief that keeps people stuck and suffering?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think that many people feel like they're doing it wrong.
Mm.
That
Hmm.
they're, oh, they're comparing their grief to somebody else. They're comparing their process to somebody else. And
Mm.
so they're doing it wrong. So now shame is just latched on to the grief. And now they're in a shame spiral along with a grief spiral. And that's why I say you're not doing it wrong. Like, there are no rules.
Mhm.
There is no rules. And that is really an important message. I think people also think that they are broken, that they're never going to have hope again. They're never going to have that life again after loss. And it's very important, because I always want to point people to that hope, that there's hope and healing and a life after loss. And that is something that I think people think is not possible, is just not possible, or that there's a time limit. That's another one. There's some sort of time limit on it. Well, after the first anniversary of everything, you'll feel
Fun.
much better, right? And then the first year anniversary, and they're like, oh my God, something's still wrong with me because I'm still like a mess. And as time goes on, you almost feel worse because it's that many years since you've seen, talked, heard, hugged,
Mhm.
kissed your loved one. And it's almost like, wait a minute, they said it was going to be easier after a year. So there's a lot of misconceptions, but that is another big one.
Yeah. Yeah. And trusting everyone's journey is different. I believe anyhow. So it's really, we're each going to go through the journey in a very different way.
Absolutely.
So when people hear the word grief, they often think only of death, and that's kind of what we've been talking about. But I know that you teach that loss can show up in many different forms, right? Divorce or a health scare or just an identity shift of some sort. Can you unpack that a little bit so that our listeners can understand that a little more?
Yes, I think it is really important that to understand that there's so many different types of loss. So when I would say to somebody, oh, that's grief. And then it's like, oh my, they've got now something that they can actually put a name to it. And now we can work through that
Mhm.
because they just thought, well, their dog died. So we're talking pet loss, divorce, friendship breakups,
Mhm.
relationship breakups, parental alienation is another one where there's a breakup and one parent turns the children or child against the other parent.
Mhm.
And that is devastating. So there's also financial loss, moving out of a country. When I moved from Seattle to the UK, I was like, I don't even know what these people are saying. I know we're speaking English, but I don't understand a word.
Right.
And, I left all my friends and my family and a job I loved. You can lose a job.
Mhm.
Empty nest. You said that earlier. When my girls left, I was like, what are you doing? Why are you leaving me? Like, what? I didn't say that to them. I'm like, go spread your wings, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
do what I've taught you to do. And then cried for 2 years,
Yeah.
So empty nesting, there are loss of identity. We attach our identity to people or things or even places. And when that's gone, now we start going, who are we? And,
Right.
especially when we get to kind of middle age, it's like, who am I? Who am I now? I don't even know. And so there's a lot of different types of loss. Those are just some of the
Mhm.
many
Mhm.
that, mental and physical health as well. So when you start to identify, ooh, that's a loss. Ooh, I'm actually grieving.
Right.
Now you can start to work through that.
So looking at things and understanding actually what's happening is what I hear you saying is part of that first moment. But that's awareness. It's
Yes.
awareness, bringing to your awareness about this is grief. There may not be a death associated it, but I am grieving, and then allowing
Mhm.
that space and taking that time to dive into it.
Absolutely. And comparing grief is very dangerous. So
Ah,
somebody who has went through a divorce would go, "Oh, but it's nothing that like what you've been through, Lisa." Or and as David Kessler says, he said, "Your grief is the worst grief because it is yours."
yes.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
So try not to minimize your loss as, oh, it's not as bad as that person. So I'll just have to get over it. But actually, it's really at the core, there's real pain and heartbreak that you need to address and work through.
Yeah. What would you say? So once someone realizes that they're now in grief, right? They're in the grieving process. What are some of those actionable items that you encourage them to be able to take so that they can start moving through it powerfully?
Yes. Again, it's one of those where I say it is good to have a third party person who's not emotionally attached. So that might be a therapist, a counselor, a coach. You might do energy work if you can go really woo woo, or you can do like personal development stuff. I did a bit of both. Well, I did everything, as we know. But you can podcasts. There's so many podcasts. There's books out there. Finding what it is that you're going through, and then there's going to be we are a bit grief illiterate, but we are getting so much better. So find your people. So that might be a therapist or a counselor.
Yeah.
There are obviously tools that you can use, but when you're in it and you're trying, it's like I always say, it's like a ball of string in your brain, and it's just a knotted mess and you have no idea where to start.
Yeah.
So that's why I always say, like, once you even are self-aware and you get it, then it's going to be a matter of then taking steps. Some people aren't really pro therapy. I am. So I was like, that was my first port of call. And so that's what I did first. And then after I was going through the process of counseling, I then was like, okay, well, now what? And then I thought, well, I don't even know what a life coach does, but I probably should find one. And I Googled, right? And so it is about finding the things. And then some people are super spiritual. And so they'll go into the woods with their gongs and, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like trying to find the thing that actually sits energetically well with you, that it makes sense to you. And I always say, try it on, see if it fits. If it doesn't, it's fine. Go find something else.
Yeah.
But it really is, in my view, about doing something or sitting with it, and then taking the action that is needed.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you distinguish there is a difference, right, between doing and being, and we've got to balance those two. Otherwise we end up in that do, which then
Yes.
suppresses. So you talk about living unapologetically and authentically. What does that mean for you, and how do you advise people in that area?
It's such a difficult one because I think, in our, like, in a society, and I was always mom and wife, and I just really didn't even know who I was. And as you get older, I think, midlife, you start going, okay, who am I? What do I want? But really, it was when I was faced with these losses that I started to really tap into this knowing, tap into something's out of alignment, something's not right. I don't know what it is other than the losses, but I know I'm not happy. So, how do I then become who I'm supposed to be? And that, with a lot of help from the counseling and from the coaching, I started to really unpack who I am, my values, what's important to me, like my core non-negotiable values, and then step into that power and not apologize for it. And it's a beautiful thing. I don't know if it's because I'm, 55, or if it's because I'm literally like, nah, life is short, life is fragile. I'm going to go live it to its fullest, because I just don't know what tomorrow or even today is going to bring. So I did a lot of personal development. I'm really addicted to personal development. Always have been. So that was never anything new. But after the losses, I really started to do a deep dive into who I am, what I want out of this very short and fragile life. And that has been so powerful and so rewarding. And it's like I've gone through, and we don't arrive, but I'm further down the line. And now what I feel like I do is I turn around and I help others. Like, this is what I did. Let me show you. Yes. And I just take them on this journey of self-discovery. And for me, that has been one of the most powerful, powerful things that I have done. And one of the most, that I'm proudest of, actually.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important because when we do deal with grief in whatever form, whether it's death or divorce or some sort of life change, it does give us an opportunity to reflect on, hey, am I living by my values? Hey, wait a second, what are my values? And I think we take these things for granted a lot of the time, and this does give us an opportunity to shine a light and to move forward on that.
100%.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you for the work that you do and what you bring to people who are going through this time of life that is difficult, but can also be transformative and magical in its own right. So I always ask Lisa, I always ask our guests, what are the top three things that our listeners can actually begin to implement in their lives to, manage their way through grief if they're going through it right now, or to prepare themselves, because we know that it is an inevitable part of life.
Yes, absolutely. But I think we did talk about some of them. One is your support system, right? Healthy support system. Start working on that if it has not happened yet. But make sure you have a healthy support system always around you. And I would say that the other is, what do I need right now? What is it that I need? And sit with that. You may not know what that is in your thoughts, but your body is going to tell you. Like, you will, if you quiet your mind, that thought is going to fly in and you're like, ooh, I need to go to Zumba. Ooh, I need to go to counseling. Ooh.
Yeah.
And pay attention to those signs and synchronicities. Those are
Yeah.
really, really powerful. And then I think the other part is looking for the support that you do need. So you might have a friend who has a wonderful bereavement counselor. Take that really necessary, scary step, because working through your grief, you will get to the other side, let's say. So it isn't that you get over it, but oh my God, you can just live a life that is just so full and so passionate and so purposeful, but you have to do the work first. Unfortunately, sorry to say, there's no shortcuts.
Yeah, sometimes we got to wade through the poo, right?
Yeah, I remember saying to my counselor, I was like, listen, is it 2 years yet? She's like, why? I go, I don't know. I'm just thinking in 2 years down the road, it's going to be better. I don't know why, but I had to go through it. I wanted to skip over it and I couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. When we come to the place where it's almost like we release the resistance to thinking it's going to be another way. The old saying, what you resist persists. So as long as we think that it's going to be a different way, we can't move forward. But when we actually release that, then we can start to move forward.
100%.
That's pretty powerful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being with us here today. I know that you've probably sparked lots of thoughts and ideas and, questions for our audience. So please tell us, Lisa, how people can get in touch with you. And I know you have a fabulous gift that you've offered to our community as well to help them. So we'll have all of Lisa's information and a link for her gift in our show notes. But Lisa, if you could share that with everybody as well.
Yeah, I think the easiest way is my website, because that'll take them to any social media, and it's holisticlifecoaching.org.uk. And yes, there'll be a free download for grief support, just some of the do's and don'ts on supporting a loved one who's grieving.
I love that. So they can use it to give away and they can use it for themselves.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us, everybody. We'll see you next week for the next episode of True Wellness with Dr. D. This is Dr. D reminding you to tune into your body, connect with what matters, and embrace the journey to true wellness. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready to redefine their health. Be sure to grab a copy of the True Wellness checklist right in the show notes. Let's keep redefining wellness and empowering change together. See you for the next episode.